Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, your host. Very pleased to welcome back to the show someone who's been on many times over the course of, I don't even know how many years.
8
10?
years. 8.
Really? Mm-hmm. Has it been only 8? Seems like a lot longer. But in any event, we're very happy to welcome to the show tonight our state representative from the 54th Assembly District, Lori Palmeri. And if you're a regular viewer of the show, or listener of the show, you will probably recall that she was on about 4 months or so ago, and we didn't get anywhere near to finishing our list. So she was good enough to come back on tonight, and we're going to try not to have quite as ambitious of an agenda, but we still have a lot to talk about. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you.
And
we do need to catch up. A lot has happened in those few months.
And happy Mother's Day in advance to you, because I'll probably forget. Okay, so it's been a really busy time for you, and I get your newsletter, and it's always chock full of stuff. I mean, you are on the go all the time, and you're always somewhere doing something. You are definitely earning your pay, and I think representing us in the 54th very well.
Thank you.
But speaking of the 54th, part of the district has changed because we've had for the longest time, we had maps that were gerrymandered, and that is now finally corrected. Governor Evers signed that into law. When did he sign that in? Just in the last few months or so, right?
Yeah, let's see. It was, I want to say it was probably signed it after, but it was in the March time frame.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And we're on May 2nd right now. So,
yeah.
So anyway, we are going to bring up side by side the old map as opposed to the new map. The lines have been redrawn. It should now be a more fair way to have votes counted and so forth. But we're going to take a look at these maps. We've got the old one and the new one. So Lori, why don't you, as we're looking at these, tell us what has changed?
Right. So first of all, this isn't quite to scale. You've got the new maps effective for next year on the right. You've got the former maps from 2022 on the left. You can see on the left that we had a more kind of southern orientation, and then on the north end of things, there were several little islands disconnected. And it's a little hard to see on this size, but it kind of looked like Swiss cheese. And so with the new maps, they are more compact, more contiguous, and then if you look at the right, it still remains number 54. We're very fortunate because some districts have changed numbers.
Oh, wow.
Around us used to be the 53rd. It will be the new 55th. And so to the north, what happened is we end up gaining a significant portion of town of Oshkosh, town of Inland, and then you can see how it goes westerly over towards Butamore. Mm-hmm. But on the south side, there's about 1/3 of that south side that is now part in that beige area, actually in the 55th.
And if you, really enhance the maps, you can probably even see streets.
Yeah.
So I know that with the lines for the districts being redrawn, some people who used to be in the 54th are no longer in the 54th. Do you have some sense, Lori, of where those people are located, or is it just kind of a hodgepodge?
Yes. So, and for anybody who wants to know for sure, you can go to legis.wisconsin.gov. There's a big link on there that says, "Who are my legislators?" And then when you click on that, you can enter your address and click the little search icon, and it will bring up the list of who your legislator is until the end of this year, because we continue to serve the 2022 maps until the end of this year. And then you can see who is on for next year, and then it will also show you who lives in that district for next year. Okay. But anyway, about, like I say, 1/3 of the south side, so along like 15th, going down South Park, and that out to 20th, and south of that is now in the new 55th. It is no longer in the 54th. So if you're on the south side, I highly encourage you to look up and see who your representative is now. and for the new district. And then again, folks up in town of Oshkosh, town of Inland, and over out towards Butamore. It runs about Indian Point Road, or I'm sorry, Brooks Road to the west, goes up Highway 76, over Breezewood, down Wooden Shoe, and then over, I think it's like GG, out to the lake.
And that's all the 54th.
That's all the 54th
Okay.
in that bright yellow. And then the other thing that happened is that we shifted
We can
into
bring
a
it
new...
back to us now, guys.
Sure. The other thing that happened is we shifted into there's a new 18th Senate District. We're still numbered 18. In the current or previous, we were at the head, the northern segment of that Senate District.
And we've got a map of that as well, so why don't we take
Yes.
a look at the new Senate District 18.
And so we were at the north head of that.
There we go.
Now we are shifted north, and we are at the southern end of what I'm calling the Purple Coast here.
Okay.
See that brown area?
We're the brown.
Yep.
Right? Okay.
That's 54. And then you've got 53. So it's basically Oshkosh, Neenah, Menasha, parts of Appleton that are in the new 18th Senate District. So we are
Parts
shifted
of
north.
Appleton?
Parts of Appleton we are in the same Senate District with, yes.
Wow. Is that something new?
Yes.
Wow. Holy cow.
That's effective for next year.
Yeah. That just seems.
And there's no
Odd to
incumbent. There is no incumbent that currently lives in that brand new Senate district. So that's up for grabs this year.
Well, I'm sure there'll be plenty of takers.
Yes, there are a number of folks running.
Yeah, there won't be a shortage of candidates, that's for sure. So basically what we need to make sure of, I think, is that people find out, if there's any doubt at all, they should. We're done with the maps, guys. Thank you. I think if there's any doubt at all, they should probably use that Find Your
By address,
Legislator
yep.
tool, and you can get to it from a number of different places. Lori gave you a couple. We've also got a couple that we can bring up on the screen as far as website addresses that people can go to. There's like 4 or 5 places that people can go and
Absolutely.
find out.
Yeah.
So there's 2 of them up on the screen now. For people watching this, you can obviously see it. We'll leave that up there for a moment or two. If you're listening to us by radio, you can go to wi.gov, so wi.gov, or you can go to myvote.wi.gov, and you can find, there's a lot of information there. I mean, you can find out a lot of stuff just by going to those
your polling
places.
place, you can register, you can change things, request absentee ballots.
Yeah, and you know, if you're voting by absentee ballot, and you do that on a pretty consistent basis, you can actually request
For the whole year.
For the whole year, absentee ballots, and you just have to make that one request, and that's it. And it works like clockwork. They send them out automatically. Postage paid return envelopes, or you can drop them off at City Hall, but not in the same slot that you would drop your bill in.
Actually, they changed it. So if you're doing early voting or turning in your absentee in person, you now go to 19 West Irving, the new city building.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying if people are just dropping off their ballots, they should not be putting them in the same box or the little drop.
Right, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't do that. You actually would have to either mail it or hand walk it into City Hall. You can't just drop it in the same box, the same drop chute where you would put like your water bill or property tax bill or whatever.
And I forgot about it. I was doing absentee and early voting. I was going to go turn my ballot in this last election, and there were big signs up that said, "Please go to 19 West Irving." So it's
in
changed,
the
a
old
little
Electronic
change.
Industries building. That's kind of on Irving and Jefferson, sort of, right there. So, okay. Why are the maps being changed? Why? Explain to people why that is so important, and why Democrats in particular, but a lot of people, were clamoring for these maps to be redrawn for years, and we finally got it done. But why?
Well, first of all, every 10 years when the census is done and that census data comes back, maps are to be redrawn, okay? And the way in which they were redrawn previously were not viewed as fair. They were not viewed as contiguous or compact.
Because?
Because, like, for example, in the Supreme Court oral arguments, or the brief, I should say, Oshkosh was actually used as an example. There were these pieces and parts in these different areas that were separated. And so certain neighborhoods and communities of interest and things like that were left out. And it was viewed that the legislators were choosing their voters rather than the voters choosing their legislators.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking to folks about gerrymandering and things like that, then that always gets discussed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really
It's a fairness. It's a fairness issue.
It led to, kind of like you said, the lawmakers choosing who their voters were, and they would draw the maps so that they were cherry picking voters.
Well, and I have to say that even with this new map for the 54th, it doesn't change hugely in terms of the partisan split. It's quite similar, but in geography it changes. And I like to use this description. So we previously were urban. The 54th was the urban center of Oshkosh, predominantly. And now we are like 1/3 geography more rural. So I call us Reuben. We are now Reuben. Not quite urban, not quite rural, a little both.
All right, excellent. Well, I'm anxious to see in upcoming elections if this makes a difference at all.
I think overall for the state, it will make a big difference in terms of that representation and reflection.
Yeah. Have maps in other districts, have they changed significantly
Oh, yes.
too?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
quite a bit. Quite a bit. The Senate maps and the Assembly maps.
So with the new state Senate map, I know it doesn't affect you so much, but does that? I mean, that's going to create kind of a marketing nightmare. I'll say, for lack of a better word, for state senators, because they're going to have to, like, if you were the state senator as opposed to the state representative, you'd be having to reach out to people in a whole new county.
So, for example, our former senator, or our current senator, going back and presently until the end of the year, Dan Fyan, he is actually now living in the new 20th Senate District, whereas he was the senator for the 18th.
So we won't have him anymore.
We will not. And his district goes from like North Fond du Lac and Fond du Lac over to all the way to Lake Michigan. So, there have been pretty significant changes on that Senate map.
Interesting.
And everybody should be aware that in each Senate district there are 3 assembly districts. And so the 3 assembly districts that are in the new District 18 is 54, 53, and 52.
So 52, 53, and 54 are in the
New
state's
18th Senate District.
Okay.
Yeah. 52 is Representative Snodgrass. 53 is a brand new assembly seat as well, as we said, a little bit up for grabs there. And so 3, each Senate district has 3. That's why we have 99.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around why we still have as many little districts, if you will, just in the Winnebago County Board. It's
a lot.
craziness.
30, what is it, 34? 36?
Yeah, I mean, we used to have, 38, I think, at one time. It hasn't come down a whole lot over the years, and I really think it needs to, but that's another conversation for another time. Anything else about the maps that you want to draw people's attention to?
Again, the reminder is that your current representative represents you until the end of this year. And then after the election, whomever is elected in the new maps is going to represent. Now, some of us will be reaching out to those new geographic areas just to introduce ourselves, say hello, that kind of thing. And I've already attended a couple of town board meetings and towns association meetings to try and get an understanding. about things that I'd never dealt with before, like where to move the manure pits or, different permitting issues and things like that that are just different than the city proper.
Sure. And just to make sure people understand, your term is not up for another year. And
No, I'm running for re-election this year.
Are you?
My term is up this year. Yeah, it's been 2 years. Can you believe it?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I stand corrected then.
We get
It's been
2
a
years.
fast
Yeah,
2 years.
2 years in the Assembly. It's 4 in the Senate. Yeah.
Wow.
So half of the senators are running, and half of them are not. They're kind of like staggered. Yeah.
Yours is a spring election, though, or is it a fall
No,
election?
it's fall.
It's
It's
fall.
November.
So I'm going to have you back on again.
Yeah, with
when you're actually running,
Yeah.
and we can get opposition on and that kind of thing. So, all right, excellent. Well, very good. Well, let's talk about the next thing on my list is the vehicle registration fee, or what some people are calling the wheel tax. Earlier this year, the Oshkosh Common Council approved a $35 annual registration fee. On top of, it does not replace what the state charges you to register your vehicle.
Correct.
This is in addition to, I think for a single passenger car, not a single passenger car, but for a regular car, I think it's $85, and then for trucks it's a little more or what have you. But this is a $35 fee just for people who live in the city of Oshkosh. Aren't we lucky? And that is in addition to a 0.25% up to a 0.5% increase in our utility bills, which for the city it's just the water. That's what the city provides. So these things were done supposedly to make things more fair for people when their roads have to be repaired. And so no more is it, okay, the city pays 1/3, people on one side of the street pay 1/3, and people on the other side of the street pay 1/3. That's gone. Now this is supposed to be taking care of it. However, here's the rub. This only applies to vehicles 8,000 pounds or under. Anything over 8,000 pounds, they get a freebie for right now, and we all know that they're the heavier vehicles are the ones who are damaging the streets more so than vehicles 8,000 pounds or under. So the city can't do anything about that because of how the state laws are.
Yeah.
When you were here last, we talked about that, and you were going to look into that and see what could be done at a state level to make this more fair.
So yeah, there have been a couple of folks who have asked about that, and it's not quite a freebie because the DOT has, as we followed up on this, indicated they actually pay these like CDL fees, and so there are other fees built into heavier vehicles, right? That are obviously above 8,000 pounds. What's not really clear is, how much of that comes back to a municipality. There are other things, like on a gas tax, for example, that goes to the state, and then some of that comes back in the form of transportation aids. But going back to the vehicle registration fee, also known as the wheel tax, certainly there is that chunk that goes to the state. But then you also have this $35 add-on that the city has done as a way to kind of spread out paying for streets so that it was, and I advocated for this at one point. It's not the elegant solution that we would like to have, but we had gone through several iterations of what could be done. But essentially, rather than someone getting, this massive special assessment when your street is up, right, that you would either have to finance or either through the city or privately or pay cash in some instances. But it was thought that if we could spread this out, there are some folks who, have issue, and I can understand this, that, they already paid, but at some point you're going to have to pay again because they don't last forever, right?
Right.
And this only, as I understand it, only covers the street portion, not the utility portion of a special assessment. So you're still going to have to deal with, some of the utility parts of that.
Okay, so explain what that is.
So like what this what the city was doing is, as they were replacing roads and surfaces, it's like they were also evaluating whether or not those utilities, those underground utilities, your sewer laterals, your water mains,
gotcha.
that kind of thing. Right. So oftentimes what you were seeing when those streets were redone was these deep ditches where they were also doing other parts.
And in a lot of cases, now that you explain it that way, in a lot of cases, because this city is so old, and so many of our streets are old, and therefore they have old sewer laterals and sewer pipes and what have you.
Exactly.
And they don't carry as much water as they should. And so that's one of the reasons we had so much flooding. When we'd have
there's been a lot of work done.
100-year flood that we had about 9 years ago, 10 years ago, something
2008.
like that. Okay.
I remember. I hurt my back carrying wet stuff out of the basement.
So I mean, those things are being replaced when the roads are done, if they need to be replaced.
So ultimately, the vehicle registration fee is administered as what they call a ride-along, no pun intended there, with your vehicle, with that annual fee. Vehicles, there are some that are exempt, so non-expiring plates such as like collector, hobbyists, and so they don't have that fee. Apparently they are exempt.
The $35 fee? They don't have to pay?
The wheel tax. Now, let's see here. I'm not quite clear. I don't think that they're exempt from a registration, but they have the non-expiring plates. But our legislative council basically said there's nothing in the state statute that taxes vehicles above the 8,000 pounds. But apparently there's a policy that, they didn't want to chase out these fleets of vehicles by imposing a tax at the local level. So the only form of tax that these vehicles have are registration fees, kind of built in with some of that CDL, those commercial things. So they're paying at a different, into a different bucket, if you will. Right. So it's not like they're getting a free pass.
Well, right, but those fees that they're paying, those CDL fees and whatever else they're paying, we don't know how much, or if any of that is coming back to the municipalities. So from a road destruction standpoint, I think they may be getting a freebie.
I think it was, kind of it's bringing business and jobs and, things to the economy. So there's kind of a way, not a means test, but a weighing of the benefit to the community in general. But back to the point, it could be changed, but whether or not there's the political will to change that 8,000 pound. So,
well, we've got to get the political will. We've at least got to get it in front of lawmakers to see, to kind of test the waters. I mean, is this something that you may be drafting some, proposed legislation on and moving forward?
We are exploring it, but it's sounding to me, the more I ask around about it, it's sounding to me that, they don't want to cause, corporations that are currently in municipalities to just move to a new location without a tax, and then the revenue that does come in with that you would, end up, what do I want to say, fixing one thing and breaking another. So we're exploring it. I'm not promising anything.
But I think that's kind of a silly argument for people who are making that argument. I mean, what company who's been around and has a building and so on and so forth, who is going to just up and move their entire company because they don't want to pay some fee, to a municipality? I think that's a ridiculous argument. That's just like when EAA was saying, oh, we need this, that, and the other, and if we don't get it, we're just going to leave. You're not going to leave. You've got all this infrastructure out there. You've got a museum out there. You've got the space. You've got a brand new air traffic control tower. You're not going anywhere. I mean, these are threat arguments.
Ultimately, it is, I think, very difficult for struggling families, of which we have a number of, our households are, below median income or, very low income. And so that extra $35, can make it's not going to buy you a whole grocery cart of groceries. However, it's going to be a sticker shock, right? Come time when it's time to renew. I don't want to second guess our new council or our council's decision. I would have liked to have seen it like staggered, but I'm sure that that's a city policy question that council will have to, they'll be hearing from folks on that, I'm sure.
Well, so you are going to kind of maybe put something together?
We're exploring it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're drafting anything. We're checking in with stakeholders and, what are those other areas where those heavier vehicles are paying. And again, there'll be a whole new legislature next year to have some of those conversations with. And
it would be interesting, if you could possibly find out how much of those CDL fees and other fees that they're paying, how much of that really is coming back to Oshkosh, and I would assume if there's, say, 10%, that's high, but let's just say 10% coming back to the city, I would assume it's the same amount coming back to other municipalities as well.
I don't want to mislead anyone because, on the one hand, we were kind of having a little bit of a bifurcated conversation. There's the gas tax, right, where that goes to the state and some of that comes back in transportation aids.
Right.
I'm not clear yet on how this other piece comes back, to be honest. We're not that far along in those discussions.
Well, that would be good to know.
Yeah.
So, Now, your staff person put something else on the list here, and I was uncertain how it got on there or what it even was. Something called preemption local control. So,
sure.
Basically what it's saying is that no entity at a lower level of government, can take precedence over laws that have been put forth by a different level of government. In other words, you can't supersede one over the other. And this affects Wisconsinites in a lot of different ways. For example, Wisconsin's local governments cannot enact tighter regulations on landlords and rental properties other than what's already provided for in state law. So no rent control either. They can't set minimum wages higher than the state minimum wage, which is a miserable $7.25 an hour. That is ridiculous. Can't do anything really with that's related to workers. Can't create public broadband services that have any hope at all of keeping up with the private monopoly called Spectrum, aka formerly Time Warner Cable. Can't ban plastic bags. It goes from the really big stuff to the tiniest stuff I've ever heard of. So Oshkosh people, we can't enact any legislation that
preemption of local control. I believe the legislative assistant put this in the mix here because that was a big package that the other freshmen or first year legislators, we all worked together to put together a package of bills, and so we called it the local control package. And we assigned them out and we drafted the bills. We put them together, rolled them out. However, it's not that any of them got hearings, but things like local options for sales tax, rent control, inclusionary zoning, tax incremental finance, affordable housing. Right now, you can keep a TIF open for an extra year at the end of that, and it has to be used for affordable housing projects. So there was a proposal by Representative Ratcliffe, who's now running for Senate, to extend that for 3 years. Things related to the local levy, residency requirements of employees. There's another package called the Milwaukee provisions. Your health officer provisions, regulation of your transportation networks, their drivers, school district levy limits, expenditure restraint program. So there were 14 bills that we put together to roll out to return more of that local control back to communities because they know best. I mean, there are some things obviously of statewide concern that we all have to play in the sandbox, according to those rules. But 14 items, and I'm sure there's a whole list of other things, but it was exciting. It was very exciting.
Yeah, and you can't a city or a county they also can't impose their own little additional sales tax unless it's put on a referendum, voted on by the public, and then they can, which is, I'm assuming, how, like the stadium in Milwaukee and the stadium in Green Bay, I think that's probably how they got those things passed.
Yeah, they also have these like baseball district, all these other kind of things. Actually, Tony and I got a chance to go down there this year and just a couple of weeks ago, see his favorite Yankees. And I was wearing the Brewers shirt. He was wearing the New York Yankees shirt. We did sit on the Yankees side, though. They were very well behaved.
All right, excellent. Well, that's good to know.
Lots of security.
I bet. All right, so with respect to this that your staff person put on, was it just this preemption local control topic? Was that just kind of put on to alert us to kind of what's going on, or did that revert back to this wheel tax thing?
Well, as we were talking about wheel tax and that being an option, that is one area of local control that communities still have the ability to do,
okay.
Right? But so many other things have been chipped away, and so we would like to return some of that control in the coming session.
And that would only make sense. I mean, who knows better than the municipality, whether it's a city, a township, a village, whatever, who knows better than a municipality what they need, and this is how you and I were butting our heads against the establishment when
2017 was it, I think?
Something like that, where we were trying to do something, with respect to rental housing and giving tenants some more protections and so forth.
Absolutely, and that was one of the things.
We just got beaten up by that, big time.
Well, that was one of the things that, I was really proud of Oshkosh, that we moved forward even though the state statutes removed some abilities, like, going back to when there was a whole slate of, city council folks that ran for office because they didn't like the rental registration or, the proposed inspection program and that. And so that's one area where local control could be returned. And think about it, not to in any way other, university students, but certainly those communities that have, thriving university campuses may have different needs, housing and, density and things like that, parking, So we do retain or I should say the city does retain at the local level, their oversight on parking, and that's another matter for another show.
Yeah. Although I don't have a big problem with parking these days.
Well, that's the thing, right? So you live in a neighborhood where there's lots of street parking, wider streets, maybe bigger driveways.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lori. I thought you meant like downtown parking and.
Oh, you mean like commercial parking, like parking lots?
Yes.
I'm talking street parking,
okay,
but
gotcha.
Again, that's city and.
Yeah.
I got to stay in my lane a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm still a citizen.
Finish your thought.
No, just that returning, much of this local control back to a community, so that they are able to, reduce rather than increasing fees, reduce fees, or, we have a huge amount of folks that come and visit here. Imagine if, there was a local option sales tax where a percentage of that was increased. But we did get shared revenue increased. I'm very, very excited that, Oshkosh saw the benefit of a 20% increase in shared revenue coming back.
That's great.
Which it's still not quite enough. They still need to redo the formula, but that certainly allowed for more investment in public safety and transportation and a host of other needs.
And when did that go into effect, Lori, that additional 20%?
Holy buckets! Trying to think of what
it
was this year. It was in this past towards the end of the budget.
Okay, all right. So somewhere between last year about this time, maybe a little later. So
this budget that the city passed, they were able to plan with that,
and that's helpful. That's helpful.
Yes.
It's just nice to see more of our money coming back to us, because otherwise, there's all these unfunded mandates, and they just keep piling them on, and more and more and more. And the little guys like us, we can't continue to afford all this stuff. So it's nice to see some of that money that we're already paying to the state coming back to us. Okay, well, we touched very briefly on this, affordable housing. So I've been saying for a few months now that, when developers come into a community with a proposal to build some of these, I'm going to say these large apartment complexes, because that's kind of what we're seeing these days. And when they come in with their proposal, I would like to see a restriction put on them that, okay, you want us to approve these plans, that's fine, but a certain percentage of your property is going to have to be used to rent out to people who have low to moderate income, something $50,000 or less per year. And I don't know if that's even legal, but I've been talking about it with some folks, and I think, not just because I thought of it, but I think it's a good idea. So can we do it?
Well, I think there are certain situations where that can be done. Does that mean that they necessarily will bite on it? Private developer certainly can, not put a proposal, right? Yeah. But if you look at tax incremental finance, where we're offering, this kind of sweeten the deal thing, certainly council could put in that criteria, that we want to see this public interest served in this way. Whether or not when they negotiate that redevelopment agreement, the developers see a return on their investment or an IRR rate that they like. But I do think that with the passage of being able to extend the life of tax incremental finance, I've had some discussions with some of my colleagues in Madison. What if we did that at the beginning, rather than at the end? Is there a way we can flip the ship around? Because quite honestly, we can't wait 15 or 20 years to do what needs to be done in the number of units that we need. However, there are some new tax incremental finance structures which the city has introduced, and the state determines what type of TIFs are available. Maybe we look at one that is a little restructured in that way, because it needs to happen yesterday. It needs to happen yesterday. Now, going back to what has been done, so there were 2023 Wisconsin Acts 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 2023 Wisconsin Act 209 all addressed rents and housing development. It ranges from your residential housing infrastructure revolving loan funds to a Main Street housing rehabilitation revolving loan fund, to infuse some monies into some of these downtown kind of commercial corridors. And then let's see, certain land development, local approval of residential housing. My favorite is called, I think it's called, WIDA calls it vacancy to vitality, I believe, where you can take commercial property and turn that into residential and get some gap financing in there. Because as we know, there are a number of commercial spaces that are, but it also has to have had the zoning addressed also. Right. And so the city of Oshkosh and other cities who want to take advantage of that also have to have their comprehensive plans and their housing elements updated.
Well, I totally understand what you were saying at the outset of this discussion, that developers can say, okay, well, if you want to put this restriction on us, we're going to take our ball and our jacks and we're going to go to a different playground. I get it, but if maybe there's such a possibility of offering them some additional tax credits, incentivize it in some other way so that they can still do that, and provide for some affordable housing for everybody.
Well, if I may, I'd like to bring up a bill that we led on, and it's AB 709, the short-term rental operation schedule modification. And this also ties in with local control, right? So there was, I can't remember, I think it was 2017, the Right to Rent Act, which basically prohibited, and it was around the same time that Oshkosh was putting in place the short-term rental, and things were kind of shifting with like Airbnbs and VRBOs and things like that. And basically the state statute says that the city cannot restrict that to less than 180 days. And so what we would like to see, because you now see across the country the housing stock being kind of gobbled up by some of these short-term rentals, because the rates can be elevated so much that they don't necessarily need to rent to a family year-round, right? If they can make enough money off of that. So we would like to see something more like 60 or 90 days, and again, returning that control back to the municipality to decide what they need.
So AB 709, Assembly Bill 709, is there a companion Senate bill number for that?
You know, I
Don't necessarily need to know.
I don't know
the
what that
number,
would be.
But
Yeah,
is there one? I mean, do you know? You
I don't
know.
think we got that far.
Okay. all right.
This was
so this
introduced.
is still kind of.
Yeah, we didn't get a hearing.
It's-
So,
Oh, well.
Yeah.
See, that's disappointing. You put a lot of work in on this stuff, and then if you don't get the right number of people to support what you're trying to do, it doesn't even get a hearing. And that's, that's part of what's wrong with this government of ours. I'm sorry, things that make sense for some people ought to be heard on. Doesn't mean you have to vote for it, but you can't make informed decisions about anything unless you know all the facts. I mean, you wouldn't do a painting and only put half of it on the wall. You'd finish the painting and then put it all up there. And it's the same thing with, legislation. You can't make decent legislation.
another one is AB 711 that I also introduced,
711.
and that is seeking what's called the Badger Care Waiver for emergency housing assistance. And so,
Okay, Badger Care Waiver
yeah, so Badger
for
Care
housing assistance?
is our Medicaid program, right? And it addresses health. And so a number of states have started to use what's called a waiver, and I can't remember what the number is. It's a certain number, 1110, or don't quote me on that, to basically issue, especially for vulnerable populations, seniors, folks who are struggling with, chronic mental illness, this kind of thing, because they recognize they would save money by having housing, that the reduction in like emergency room visits and other health related things, if they have a healthy environment, a safe shelter over their head.
Yep.
And so we introduced AB 711 on that, in that regard.
Okay. And along with that, I can see the publication in my mind's eye, but I can't for the life of me remember what it is. But the county has just put out in the last few months.
The community health
yes,
survey.
There
Yeah.
you go, community health survey. If you have a chance, go on the county's website if you're at all
It's
interested.
very informative.
Yeah, it's got a lot of great information, and just go on the county's website. But make sure it's Winnebago, Wisconsin, because there is a
Yes.
Winnebago County in Illinois. Is it Illinois?
Yes.
Yeah. And I've been stumped by that a couple of times, I hate to say. All right. We're down to 15 minutes, probably about 13 minutes now. So, but we're making good progress
we're making
here.
good progress. I'm trying to
So,
talk fast.
Yes. But we still want to give good information.
Yes.
So I think we're doing well. All right, the ERA is the next thing that that we're going to talk about here. So, Wisconsin played a very early pivotal role in supporting equal rights amendment, but the ERA has never officially been ratified. So, for example, the federal ERA was passed in the Federal House of Representatives October 12, 1971, and the United States Senate on March 22nd, 1972. Wisconsin was one of the first to ratify that on April 26, 1972, but it has never, to this day, passed an ERA amendment to our own state constitution. And that is disgusting.
Absolutely.
I mean, to put it briefly and just as plainly as I can. That's disgusting. So you've been very involved in trying to change this.
Well, certainly our office reintroduced this. It's not the first time, but it's been several years, and it was Assembly Joint Resolution 140. And I'm just going to read this verbatim. So this says the equality of rights, this is based on the equality of rights on the basis of sex, gender identity, race, color, sexual orientation, disability, religion, national origin, marital status, family status, age, ancestry, or any other immutable characteristic, and creating a private cause of action for violations of those rights by state actors. So what that means is, okay, if these rights are violated, there is protection for that violation. And so we reintroduced it for first consideration to amend our state constitution. It has to go through two considerations, two sessions, before going back to the people for ratification.
So do you think we're going to make some progress on this finally, or?
Well, it didn't make it to the floor, so we got to start all over again next session. But I think there are enough women and folks who fall in these categories who are damn tired of being more than 50 years and we still do not have our state constitution amended in that way.
Well, and why ratify something if you're not going to take the very next most logical step to have it mean something? Otherwise, to ratify it means nothing.
I could go into this really long because there were some women I met at the introduction and the press conference on this several months back who shared some of their wisdom, and they talk about the Phyllis Schlafly effect and what was going on timing-wise.
Phyllis Schlafly, there's a blast from the past.
Right, 1973.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, so there was some goofy timing going on.
I can still see her face.
Yeah, and yeah. So in any event, we keep reintroducing. But I mean, the bottom line is it's way past time for that amendment to happen. Let it go to the floor.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, what are these people so afraid of? Well, I think I know what they're afraid of, but,
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, just one real quick question. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. As I was looking at this verbiage that you read, what is an immutable characteristic? What is that?
Right.
If you don't know, that's fine.
In lay people's terms, I'm just going to say it's being human.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's talk about child care. Governor Evers signed into law, I think it was in March, a bill that would expand the state's tax credit for child care expenses, and that happened after he vetoed the rest of a Republican-sponsored tax cut package, warning those measures would put the state on a path toward insolvency. The measure signed by Evers will now allow Wisconsinites to claim up to 100% of the federal tax credit for child and dependent care on their state taxes starting in this tax year, so what we would file in 2025.
Right, for 2025.
What have you been hearing from constituents about the struggles that they're having and how this will help them?
It is a step. That was Wisconsin Act 101, expanding that child and dependent care credit. It's not quite enough. Really, what you heard a lot about, what there was a lot of passion about, was the child care counts and continuing. It was $170 million from FEMA, actually, on pandemic response operations to keep that child care counts program running through June of 2025. There was a $311 million direct child care service proposal. And then there was AB 513, and so that was the Department of Children and Families program to make payments to child care programs and child care partnerships, rulemaking. Basically, what's happened is there was extra dollars to keep a number of child care centers going, but then those dollars were going to end. Now we have closures of, I think there were numbers that were 30% anticipated closures of child care centers. So, you know, just visiting and hearing, like, some of our child care workers are making like $13 an hour. And there was some extra wage to help them. Now there are some other dollars to help them with incentivizing opening new child care, either centers or home day cares. There's like caregiver certification, free online. You could get like 30 hours of this direct care certification that may or may not impact child care specifically, but certainly senior care. So we've got child care, we've got senior care, and there's not enough folks to go around that are in that field. And I was really excited. I had an opportunity to meet with AdvoCap, the new director, Tanya, who was sharing an incubator, a child care incubator concept, where folks who may be renting and can't do it like an in-home daycare, they could basically start their own startup in this space if that gets built. And she was shopping this idea out. So I'm very, very hopeful that that kind of thing can take off.
Right.
We do have a new child care center, as I understand it, that's going to be built in the new housing, affordable housing on Jefferson and Main.
Okay.
I wish I remembered the name of that.
Well, that's encouraging and exciting. All right, one last thing. We're only going to have time to cover this one yet, because we're down to about 3.5 minutes. Fall assist legislation. Now, we hear about falls and how they can be so deadly. I personally know of 3 people in the last 2 years or so that have fallen in their homes, hit their head, and that's it. They're gone. So you testified in favor of some fall assist legislation, right?
We introduced
Tell
it.
us a little bit about that.
Absolutely.
In the short time we have left.
This was a really great opportunity to work across the aisle with Senator Fine and other folks. We got a Senate hearing. There were 2 bills. One was for requiring training in assisted living and other similar type facilities for folks to get CPR, first aid, and fall recovery. So if you fall and you don't have an injury, that you're like, oh, I just need help getting up, I have not harmed myself, I'm not going to the hospital, then someone in there would be required to help you up. Right now, the way it works is it shifts that over to calling 911, because they have what's called a no-touch policy. This was modeled similarly, not completely the same, as something passed in Arizona. Then we also created a companion bill to that to do a pilot grant program for these electronic lift assist devices. Because think about it, you don't want your caregivers blowing their back out too, right? But we also had, you know, your municipal fire and EMS being called. And then what happens is if the resident says, I can't, I'm not going, I'm fine, just help me up. They sign their waiver. Somebody gets billed for that. And Medicare and Medicaid will not pay for it if there's no transport to the hospital. So then the bill would go from the, you know, fire EMS to the facility, and then the facility is going to pass that on. And I know because my mom was a frequent flyer. And so that cost can be anywhere from, you know, $200 to $500 copay. Just to have someone help you get up. So that's what we were proposing. We got a Senate hearing. I was very excited about that. We did not get the Assembly hearing in the Committee on Health.
So
it was almost
going to try again then?
Yes, absolutely. It's ready.
You guys are not in session right now, are you? Or
no, we have a couple of like what they call skeletal session days. So we've been still going back, watching for any potential veto override activity. We had 3 days a couple weeks ago. We've got a couple days coming up here soon. But pretty much since April 15th, everybody is off back in their district, getting into the new districts and starting their campaign season.
Okay. All right. And speaking about falls, we talked about this on the last show that I did with some health experts from the county and from the Department of Aging, Resource, and
It's the ADRC, the Aging and Disability Resource Center.
Thank
and
you.
I
My brain
have to
is fried
say,
at this time of day. But there's a new app that we talked about.
Stumble. Is it the I Stumble?
No, it's Nimble.
Nimble. Okay.
NYMBL. It's a free app. Of course, all these apps are free to download, but then to use them, it's another story. But this is a free app, not just to download, but to use as well. N as in Nancy, Y, M as in Mary, BL. It's a great app. It'll assist you in so many ways. So please, if you've got a smartphone,
And that's for helping to prevent the falls.
Yes.
Right? To get your balance and get your gait.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's got exercises in there and all kinds of things. And in addition to that, the county offers a lot of different, very wonderful courses, I shouldn't say courses, but programs, classes where you can go and they'll help you with, mobilizing yourself a little bit more when you're walking or standing. They'll come in and do a home assessment of, what's safe in your home and the things that aren't safe so that you can be safe in your home and that kind of thing. So lots of good stuff out there. Well, we're almost out of time. What do you want to give for parting thoughts? I can't believe we did not get to a few of the other things that I had on this list, but we got through everything for the most part.
Well,
and that's good.
Certainly we are not completely without much to talk about in another show about artificial intelligence.
That was on my list, but I didn't even go there because I knew we wouldn't.
We held 4 hearings. Where I was on the Speaker's Task Force for AI, 4 hearings across the state. We produced a couple of bills on there. And I was oriented towards protecting the consumer. I think that consumers should know if they're interacting online with a human or a chatbot. That
it is so
not
hard
always
to
clear,
know.
right?
It's terrible.
And the chair, the representative who was chairing, introduced one that was, prohibiting the use of AI without disclosure in political ads.
Yeah, I think the more this artificial intelligence rears its ugly head, I think it's going to become so bad for people having scams perpetuated on them. Political seasons are, I think they're just going to become horrible with people mimicking, AI mimicking people's voice. You don't know anymore what to believe, what not to believe, what's real when you're looking right at it. Or is it kind of a mirage?
I think it has risks and benefits, and it needs further vetting. 4 public hearings is not enough. As a matter of fact, there is a legislative study committee starting this summer on artificial intelligence to go further with this, to make further recommendations.
Excellent. All right. Very good. Gosh, I think this is the furthest we've ever gotten.
We got through 7.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, thank you very much for not just for being here, but for everything that you're doing in the district and out. And I know you've got your hands full with new maps and all that. And we'll have you back when it's time to run again. So that's going to do it for us. Many thanks to Lori Palmeri, as always. Thanks to the crew, and thanks to you for watching and or listening. We will see you next time. Until then, take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.